Good evening. On behalf of the School Board of Sarasota County, I want to thank you for joining us for what we have tonight for you is a Meet the Candidates. It's an alternative to what we would normally do when we're working with school districts to find their next superintendent of schools. Typically, we'd have a large auditorium. We'd invite anyone from the community in who wants to come and meet the candidates. You'd have the opportunity to mingle and ask the candidates any questions you want. In fact, a few years ago when we were here helping with the superintendent search, we actually did that right over here at Riverview High School. But tonight, we're going to be talking to each candidate for approximately 15 minutes. The questions that I'm going to be asking are questions that were submitted by the community. We received over 75 pieces of input, and so we're going to work through those with each of the candidates tonight. I'm Andrea Messina, the Executive Director of the Florida School Boards Association, and with me is Brennan Asplin, Dr. Brennan Asplin, I should say, who is currently in the St. John's School District. So, Dr. Asplin, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Messina. I appreciate it.
Yes, and I do want to point out that Dr. Asplin and I are 6 feet apart. That's why we're not wearing masks. We measured it. In fact, the seats weren't that close or weren't that far apart when we first came, so we measured, took care of that. I just want to confirm that for everyone. First, let me ask you a question about the community.
Yes.
What's the most attractive thing that's making you consider a move to Sarasota County School District? How do you plan to become a part of the community, and where can the community expect to find your presence when you're here?
Yes, so my family and I vacation here quite often, and we have driven around many places in Sarasota County and really love Sarasota County. Last time I was here, when I was meeting the community, it was a joy really to meet everyone and listen to their questions and concerns, and I just loved doing that. So I appreciate this today. I know that the community is a close-knit community, and the community is a close-knit community, and there are, I'm sorry.
So let's just talk about this. I know you said you vacationed here before.
Yes.
And I know that you said you and your family have actually seen both Northport and Venice and Sarasota. What is it about the Sarasota community that draws you here?
I think in talking to people, the warmth of this community, the arts within the community. I know the school district is fantastic. The teachers are incredible. And everybody is working hard. The community really values education here in Sarasota County, and I know that I value that. My wife and I, we would love to serve in the community. In the communities that we've lived in before, we've been highly involved, and would love to serve in this community in a lot of different ways, not just through the school system.
So give us some examples.
So I know as far as going from school to meet the parents and so on and so forth, I would have community evenings that I would meet the parents, talk to the parents, try to understand what the challenges are, what things are going very well in our school district here in Sarasota County, and really understand where we need to go based on what the parents are saying in different parts of the county. Because I know in different parts of the county, there are different values, different things that they want to get done. And I think meeting them, building their trust, building relationships, and collaborating with parents and students is number one.
So they're going to see you in the schools.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Okay, the next category of question has to do with trust and relationships.
Yes.
And we got a number of questions, and some of the words that they used were things like the need to restore trust and respect, that there have been some fractured relationships, that the faith in the district is important. There's some concern about maybe some morale. So how do you intend to restore this trust and respect that this community expects and would like to continue to see?
I think being visible around the community is very important. And like I said before, setting up community conversations, meeting the superintendent so that I can talk to them about my thoughts, my heart, and help them to understand who I am so that they can build or trust me and I can build trust in the community. I think that's the biggest thing, is just being visible, being out there, meeting with folks, talking to folks, and understanding what is going on in the school system, what changes need to be made, and what possibly we need to do to make those changes. I think having a number of different focus groups is important, with a focus group for students, a focus group for community members, faith-based focus group. I think those are all important to get information from all different facets of the district so that we can act on those together and collaboratively come up with solutions and hopefully build trust through that to get the district on the right track.
And how about the relationship with the school board? How do you build a trust relationship with them?
Yeah, I think I definitely would need to meet individually with each school board member and get to know them. I also need to make sure that I am informing them of everything that is going on in the school district and what concerns there might be and what plans we might have on a daily basis, and try to keep them out in front of any issues that might occur so that they can make good decisions and talk to their constituents. I think it's all about communication on a daily basis and collaboration with them and moving forward to solve issues.
Great. The next question has to do with early learning. And one of the comments was that early learning is critical and an important segue into the elementary world.
Yes.
So can you provide some examples of how you have built collaboration with the community and other organizations that serve that birth to 5-year group of students, to help make sure that they are going to have success in school and in life? What specifically have you done to build collaborations with those outside providers?
Yes. So one of the things, I know in St. Johns County, one of the things is we had around only 200 students who were in our pre-K programs, and we needed to improve that. And basically in 2 years, we're now to 800. And that had to do very much with visiting the agencies in which some of the students were attending to find out what they're doing and let them know what we're doing. I know one of the most important things is to have certified teachers, also certified ESE teachers who teach our pre-K students. And one of the things that we definitely teach our pre-K students is self-regulation and also language. Very important as they move forward so that they can read by 3rd grade. We do communicate with the hospitals. We do drop off information about our school system so that people know as they move forward and their their child turns 3 or 4, they already know where they're going to send their child and what's entailed with that. But we have worked with many agencies who already work with some families, and we've collected a lot of data on where the students are and trying to figure out why they're not in either our schools or in other agencies and they're at home. And we've pinpointed where they live, and we've actually knocked on doors. And so over the last 2 years, we've increased from 200 to 800 students, which is a really, really great thing.
Wow, that's quite an increase. Let's talk about school district education foundations. We got several questions asking, what do you see, what do you think is the ideal relationship between a school district and its local education foundation?
Yeah, I think, getting to know the folks in each of the foundations, getting to know the board members, building that trust and that relationship is very important. I think also letting them know what the needs are in our schools. And I noticed, looking at our foundations online, I did notice that each foundation supports different areas within the school system, which I think is fantastic. And so as we move forward and we know what our needs are in different schools, I can then communicate that to the board members of those foundations and let them know what our needs are so that they can hopefully support those schools in those particular areas in a focused, strategic way.
We're going to move to diversity.
Okay.
It's been noted that your district doesn't have a lot of diversity, yes. And I know you like to remind people that you used to work in Seminole County,
yes.
which has maybe not certainly, but more diversity, different diversity, yes. than St. Johns County. But what experiences do you have dealing with diverse districts, and also how will you be able to build sort of racial and ethnic equity in the schools for the students and the teachers.
Yes. So you're correct. In Seminole County, during my 18 years there, I believe 12 of those were in Title I schools, and there were high poverty schools, and minority rates were higher as well. One in particular, Millennium Middle School, was 2,100 students, Title I school, and the poverty rate was very high, and again, minority rate was high as well. And one of the things that was interesting was in trying to talk to parents or have parents come in to relate to them what's going on with their student, it was hard to get folks in. And I think communicating with them at their home, number one, also communicating at their churches. I went to their churches and met the pastors and built relationships with pastors, which I think parents truly trust their pastors. And that allowed a door to open so that parents would come to the school and I'd be able to have more communication with them. I think, having programs for our teachers, for instance, I remember we went through Ruby Payne, and that was fantastic.
Now, for people who don't know what that is, I know what Ruby Payne is, but can you give people an idea?
Ruby Payne is a professional development training. It's a book, and you have professional development training for students in poverty,
right,
and how to work with students in poverty.
It's one of the foremost books on poverty for educators, for sure.
And then Dr. Holly, Shiraki Holly's book on cultural responsiveness is a very good book as well. And I know right now in St. Johns County, for instance, all of our folks are reading that book, and we are going through a book study and training with that book to help us with the cultural responsive piece.
Great. There is some concern about school districts, physical campuses becoming more sort of silo-esque, and some questions about zoning. And so, have you worked on zoning issues in the past? And how do you determine attendance zones and zoning, especially in a time of trying to help parents find the best match for their students?
Yeah, so with zoning, in St. Johns County, we're building schools quite often. We have 2 more being built right now, and it seems like we go through the zoning process every couple of years. I think it's important that we meet frequently in town hall meetings and talk to parents about what our thoughts are on the zoning process and be able to show some sort of plan to get it started, just a starting plan. And then we, I think it's a really good idea to then have parents and anyone else who wants to stand up and speak and talk about what they think about the plan or what they think the plan should look like and bring up their concerns. I think it's always a good time to do that. We take a lot of notes in those meetings, and then we do revise our plans depending on what makes sense based on the concerns that we heard. And I have not been through one rezoning yet where we didn't take all the parent feedback and actually make changes to the plan that ended up being approved by the school board. And can you describe in detail what your priorities for the first year would be as a new superintendent in Sarasota County? Yeah, so I think the first thing would be to build a relationship with the school board. Definitely, that would be first. Secondly, I feel like I need to build a relationship with the entire school district and meet parents and meet teachers and principals and visit schools to get to know the district as well as I can. I'd like to sit down with the principals and go through their school improvement plans, look at their data, try to see what they're working on, and maybe show them what I see so that maybe we can tweak some things if needed, and then ask them for what support they might need. But I really think the very first thing that I would do is get out there and be visible and meet people in the community. And if that takes every night for the first 6 months, that's what I'll do. And I really can't wait to do that, to get to know our folks here in our community and get to know the community a little bit better and what concerns and needs that we have and maybe what solutions we can work on together. Great. Now, our time is dwindling. I know it moves quickly, yes, but I want to specifically ask you, because in your interview this morning, you mentioned using teacher assistants, and there was a lot of questions, yes, about that. And so I want to give you an opportunity to sort of clarify for people, because I think there's some
it's a new thought, and,
Right.
and you were asked to ask what's innovative,
Right.
and you threw
Right.
something out there,
Yeah.
but there's some misunderstanding maybe of what it might be, and so I want to give you an opportunity to clarify,
Yeah.
how does that fit with class size amendment, and how
Right.
does it fit with teachers, and as you mentioned this morning, the teachers union, it's been an agreement, and so that,
Yes.
so give us some
Yes.
thoughts on that.
So back in 2008, 2009, when we were in the recession, our executive director of human resources came up with this plan and said, hey, associate teachers might be a good idea. Here's what it was. And we shared it with the union. And the union liked it and ended up being placed into the contract back in 08, 09. But basically, when you go beyond, for instance, it's mostly in elementary school, but when you go beyond 18 students, it's 18 to 1 is the ratio, you need to have another class. You can't go over 18. You need to have another teacher. And so the associate teacher was designed to be in the classroom as a co-teach situation. So you'd have two teachers, fully certified teachers in the classroom, whether you are at 19, 20, 25 students, but you'd have two teachers in there in one room instead of also trying to find another room to move an entire class to that might only have 5 students. And so that was the thought there. And that teacher would be a co-teacher. There would be a lead teacher, but this teacher would be a co-teacher and, and does not perform as many duties as the lead teacher would. Hence the reason that the salary was a little bit lower. But with that said, what it also did was allow us and everyone at the school to see how the teacher does, how they grow, so that then they could become a teacher when we had another opening at the school. And for instance, what would happen is that class would actually grow to 20, 25 throughout the year. And when we did get to where we needed to split it into 2 classes, the students already knew their teacher, and we were able to make that person the lead teacher. But again, that was placed in the contract. It's been in the contract since 08, 09. It was placed in there when I was a principal. I had nothing to do with it.
Right.
It was an idea that was placed in there.
And you've seen it work.
And I've seen it work. And when I put it on my answer as to how to cut, what you could do to cut, my main thing was we don't want to cut anything from any teacher who's already a teacher. But if we're going to hire a new person into an associate position, then possibly they would know what they were doing, what they were getting into, and so on and so forth, that would work. But it was just a suggestion on that answer, and if it was taken off today, I'd be very happy with that. If Sarasota doesn't want to do it, no problem. It was just a suggestion.
Well, we
because
really
it was
thank
in
you
our
for taking the
CBA.
time to clarify. And we
Okay.
really thank you for your time here tonight, as well as your interest in the district. So
Yes.
thanks so much.
All right, thank you.
So I count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
Good, perfect.
10.
Thank you so much.
I'll get that. You're Diane Sawyer.
What's that?
Diane Sawyer.
There you go. Gosh, it's been a long time since I even thought about that. In the beginning. And thanks for joining us again. With me now is Dr. Peter Licata, who is currently in Palm Beach County School. So welcome, Dr. Licata.
Welcome as well. It's great to be here. It's an honor to be here in Sarasota County.
Thank you. It's a beautiful county. And speaking of that, first off, let me tell you, these questions actually came from members of the community.
Okay.
And while you guys were doing your interviews today, there was a input link, and there were over 75 pieces of input and comments that were put in there for us to gather together for these questions here. So the first one has to do with the community. The question is, what's the most attractive thing that's making you consider moving to Sarasota County School District? How do you plan to become a part of the community, and where will the community see you once you're superintendent?
So the first part of that is coming from the east coast of Florida and being a native Floridian for all my life. It's not the ocean. The beauty of the ocean is always attractive. I think the cultural and the artistic part of Sarasota, they're steep in tradition, core values, as well as the cultural arts. There's a sense of community here, a togetherness, and it's not as big as where I'm coming from, but it reminds me a lot of what I grew up in Pompano and Fort Lauderdale and in Palm Beach County. That's attractive. Mostly the citizens. I've spent some time here. I've done some charitable events here for over a few years, as well as my wife and I have spent some time here. And the community is wonderful. The folks are wonderful. They don't know me, but everyone seems to be nice. It's just a wonderful, wonderful area. Can I ask you to repeat the second part of that question?
Sure, absolutely. How are you going to become a part of the community, and where will people see you?
So earlier today, I added that into some of my answers. Pete Licata has to become part of Sarasota community, not the other way around. I need to figure out what's great about it, and I think I already know what's great about the community, and build off of that. And then find the resources and the support to where it could be even better, or some of the areas that could be even better. But right now, Sarasota County is a beautiful place. It's working hard. It's clicking like a clock. It's moving well. I need to fit in, and I need to make sure that I respect and take care of what is important in this community, and that is only going to be told by the community to me, not have me figure it out. So that is number one. I have to fit into Sarasota. And the final part of that
was, where can the community expect to see your presence?
So also, I always refer to when I go to my office is, this is my office, but my work is out there. And out there is in the community. I spend a lot of time in the community for the last 7 or 8 years as Assistant Superintendent of Choice and Innovation, as well as now the Regional Superintendent. You don't know the pulse of the world. You don't know the pulse of the community. You don't know the voice of folks unless you go into their neighborhoods and go into their churches and their community centers. And that's where they'll see me, in those places, because most folks aren't going to come to us and give us their voice. And sometimes they don't have the medium to do it, or the ability through technology. And sometimes they need to see us face to face and see that we are real people, and I am listening to you. So going into their neighborhoods is much more important than them coming to us.
Great. All right, so the next category is trust and relationships. And some of the comments that came in, some of the questions included things like the need to restore trust,
Yes.
Fractured relationships, damaged relationships, need to increase faith in the district, some questions about morale. So how do you intend to restore trust, respect, morale?
My transition to the regional superintendent last year was faced with a similar situation, and I had to look into a situation that the school district had lost some trust from the community. The only way to do that is go to the community as well. To rectify and help start the healing, I asked the community to hold town halls, meet with them and hear their voices, as well as the staff in those areas. This is a vital community that deserves to be heard, much the same I was in last year. And that started the trust process. Then I allowed them to be in part of some of the decision making. I allowed them to be a voice in some of the serious decision making, like selecting principals, like how do we go about this and who's the next person, and making sure that that doesn't happen again. And what safeguards can we do to make sure that trust is never lost? It's so hard to gain trust and so easy to lose it. So I had to rebuild it. I had to rebuild it. I believe I can do that quickly here by listening, but also by making sure that we understand how never to do it again. And we can do that in many places, but in this situation, I think we could rebuild the trust of the school district because it's a fine school district and people want to believe in it and they support it through tax referendums, and we want to make sure that stays that way. We want to give them the product that they're investing in.
And how do you build a high trust relationship with the school board?
School board is, there's 5 different entities there that have different constituents for the most part, but then when you put them together, it's one entity and all of us are a part of that. And we have to make sure we come out as one voice. I think the first part is communication, and communicating the same message to each school board member and not flavoring it to their likings, making sure that the facts are there, making sure we're out front of communication, making sure that we're not surprising anybody. And when I am speaking to the media, they already know what I'm going to say. They already know what we're talking about because they'll be informed first. And then we have to unite to make what the best decision is. If we develop a strategic plan, which it appears it needs a strategic plan in this area, we can base a lot of our decision making and a lot of falling back in research and referencing that strategic plan in order to say, this is a good decision. Why aren't we buying this? Because it doesn't go with the strategic plan. Why aren't we doing this? It doesn't go with the strategic plan that we decided on, but we will do this. Once we start all having a center base to be able to make decisions off of with a platform that says, yes, this is what we're going to invest in. And I don't surprise anyone on the board in making sure they're well communicated to before this happens, before anything goes out. I think we'll be able to build some trust together and some unity and really, really make a big splash here in Sarasota.
And let's shift to early learning, okay? The comment was made that early learning is critical and an important segue into the elementary world.
Sure.
So the question is, can you provide examples of how you have built collaboration with the community and other, organizational providers outside of the school district that serve those birth to 5-year children?
So the outside providers, it's a little more difficult because they are contractors to the district. We provide them with materials, much like Sarasota does with their early learners. As a regional superintendent, I felt that this was an important piece, that we can't wait till 3rd grade before learning starts, and we can't because it's a tested grade. So when I met with my principals first time, I said, listen, let's start putting some of our strongest teachers in early learning. Let's get them into P and K. Let's start moving into that direction because a 3rd grade teacher is not going to be able to make up 2 or 3 years. 4th grade teacher is not going to be able to do it either. Let's address it at the beginning. I know that we don't want to talk about standards and understanding standards in 1st grade or kindergarten, but sometimes it needs to be brought up because the standards are matching what students should know before they get to school. And let's see where they are. I'm not a test monger in any way, but we do need to know where students are so we can assess and give them an opportunity to improve upon their weaknesses. So yes, supporting the contracted outside organizations for early learning is a must. We have to have that 2-way communication to see what they're doing and support them in what we can do more for them because eventually those students are ours and we'd like to see them on grade level right away. So that's pretty much my perception on how we should go through with that. I did it locally in our region, and now we're seeing, because of the pandemic, we won't see the exact results or immediate results, but I see some strengths in some of the assessments we did with some of the online and platforms on seeing some students do some excellent things.
Okay. We're going to move to diversity. So how will you build racial and ethnic equity in the schools? What experiences do you have working with diverse districts?
So Palm Beach County is a little more diverse than this, but my region is much more diverse. I have 65,000 students in the region I oversee.
I'm sorry, how many students?
65,000 with 59 schools. A little bit more in students, a little bit more in schools, but much more diverse. It's about 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 when it comes to white, African American, and Hispanic. That is a really good perception to come through because you can see the balance. I know that looking at the data here in Sarasota, it's phenomenal. They do some great things. But I noticed that some of the struggling areas and struggling schools are usually children of color or children of poverty. My previous experience in that is making sure that the resources are directed appropriately, but not just thrown at schools in programs. Make sure we're supporting some of the best teachers that may be in the district right now as specialists, and also pushing hard on that early part. More importantly, we're looking at a different time in our world. Even if we recover from this pandemic, we still have a glaring sore out there that we're starting to recognize. Our young people of color are starting to recognize that their challenges are different than many. And if we don't start recognizing that in our schools, because that's where we can make a difference in our schools. I've promoted diversity for a very long time within the ranks, and most recently, one of the principal appointees that I placed was a candidate that was diverse in a non-diverse area, but she was the best candidate. It was clear she was phenomenal. The other candidates were good. She was the best candidate, and for that community and that school to continue striving really well, that was the person to be the principal. And I did get some pushback on it from the community. But at the end of the day, and near the end of the year when we had to dismiss ourselves in March, and a lot of compliments about making that decision because the community really appreciated that we made the best choice. And that person was of color. And that's what we have to do. We have to make sure we don't cave to the political pressures and put the best people in the best places. She also worked for me as a director or a curriculum specialist for years before, and I knew her strengths. I knew that's what she would be good at in that school, and she was a proven leader. And I have to go out on a limb. As leaders, we have to do that. And that is one way of making sure that we start showing our students of color that there is success the way you look, and the way I look, and the way everyone looks. It's not based on those attributes. It's based on how good of a person you are, and are you qualified? And let's get them qualified.
All right, so I'm going to move to community relationships. Actually, I'm going to ask you, what are your thoughts, and what is the right relationship between a school district and its education foundation?
So I'm a very big recipient of the Education Foundation in Palm Beach County for many years because they worked through and were able to seed many of our medical programs. We would not be the leader in choice in medical academies and CT if we did not have the Education Foundation and their drive to provide, especially an equitable lens from them, to provide for so many different voids that we aren't able to provide through our normal funding. The Education Foundation should be a key component of how we move about providing the equitable access and resources for our students. Not always do we have the funds to find it from the state funded, but with the Education Foundation and having them do a lot of our work and channeling some of their funds to us, we are able to promise the significant donors and show the Education Foundation there is a return on investment, and to continue that. We built that relationship. It was there prior to my assistant superintendent role, but it strengthened over time. And one of my biggest advocates is our CEO of the Education Foundation, because we don't become the leader we are without them, and they have to be a vital part.
And what would be your priorities within the first year of appointment in Sarasota County when you become superintendent?
So I do know that we have some great schools that have some struggling students, but are phenomenal schools. Without calling them out here, you look at the data, you see it right away, that those schools are doing really well, but they need some support and some push in some areas. Another piece would be our middle school acceleration coursework. It's very low for a high-rated district such as Sarasota, so that means exposing middle school students to more of a college level or career level type courses and start getting them the high school credits earlier. It was a little bit lower than I would expect for a strong A school district, but they do have some phenomenal categories when it comes to state grading. So I would have to look at that. And I do understand that there are some key personnel that will be retiring in the next couple of years. I mean, strong executive key personnel. That has to be an attention piece. I mean, that has to see what we have internally. I'm a strong believer in growing our own and making sure I'm finding the best people within us, training them, coaching them, as I said today, coaching and teaching. And if we can do that, there are some great people here. Let's find them and let's get them set and ready to go when we start seeing some of our great executives retiring. And I know that's been mentioned a couple times, and I did look at that. And that's important when you start losing some key people that have been around for a while that are strong. We need to build on that.
And then what specifically has been your district role in increasing minority student achievement? And you have about a minute and a half.
So I'll make this quick. We had a situation where we were seeing only certain kinds of students achieve and accelerate and get those college courses, get those acceleration courses. And when I mentioned this earlier today, I brought my team in, a small team, and said, listen, our objective statement and our focus this year is to make sure that we give our subgroups, free and reduced, ESC, the minority groups, those are our attention this year. And we will put them in the master schedule. We will put them in courses and challenge them. We can always take them out, but no longer will there be a gatekeeper of not letting these students have the opportunity to see what a college course looks like. Because when we do that, we expect mediocrity. When we put them in those courses, we expect great things. And that's what happened. So not only did we increase it to 5% that I asked, we increased it 15, 20%. And it was across the board. And not that we left anyone else out on the other side that we're achieving already and getting access. It was about refocusing on who wasn't getting the access. You give those students an opportunity, they'll amaze you. They will simply amaze you.
And then just real quickly, you know, is there anything, what do you want the community to know about you?
I think most importantly, the community will find out quickly that I communicate with everyone. Maybe over-communicate. My relationship value is at a very high regard. I believe in relationships. But most importantly, my ethical standards are unmatched, and I will never waver on those.
Wonderful.
I will make those hard decisions based on what's right.
Thank you. And so we're going to take a short break, and we are going to change mics and get the next finalist in here. So stay with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, sounds good.
Can I have you count to 10? Just for my check.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right.
And thanks for joining us again and sticking with us. With me here now is Keith Oswald, who is also from Palm Beach County. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And let me give you an idea of where these questions came from.
Okay.
So while you all were in your interviews earlier today, there was a portal where people could go through and submit any questions that they wanted to, or any topics that they wanted us to talk about. So what we've done is we've kind of culled those questions together in certain categories, and you'll all be getting most of the same questions, but then there's a question at the end that will be unique to you.
Okay.
Okay?
Fantastic.
So we're going to start with the community.
Okay.
So what do you see is the most important thing that's making you consider a move to Sarasota County School District? And then I have some follow-ups.
Okay. So first, I want to thank the entire community here of Sarasota County for the warm welcome that I've had since I've been here. It's great. I've been here before. I think one of the great things, love spring training, and a lot of places to go for spring training for baseball. But more than that, it's Florida. I love Florida. I like the sunshine. We've got beaches. We've got arts, in particular the arts community, and how big it is here in Sarasota was quite attractive for me.
And so how do you plan on becoming a part of this community? Where will people see you around?
Yeah, so being part of the community, right, so from where you go to the gym, where do you shop, where do you go bike riding throughout Sarasota County? There's great bike trails, so I think there's such a rich community here with so many activities. You'd be immersed and be part of all that.
And the baseball field.
And of course, the baseball field.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We're going to shift to trust and relationships, because there were several comments that came in and they used words like the need to restore trust, that there are some fractured relationships, that there needs to be an increase in faith in the district, and there's some questions about morale. So how do you intend to restore trust and faith and ensure that it grows and continues here?
Yeah. Trust obviously is the basis for any effective relationship, right? How do we, treat each other? How do we talk to each other? How do we respect each other? So, and that takes action and that takes time. So it's how we're very transparent and honest and build some ground rules about how we're going to respect one another as adults and with children. So building, upon, day-to-day action. So in meetings with board members, how do we become much more transparent about our feelings, but then at the same time, how do we respect each other and understand people's perspective? Everybody's allowed to have their particular perspective. So, and I think through actions, through conversations with the entire community, going out and visiting the chambers, the businesses here in Palm Beach County, hearing from the parents, listening and learning about what do they love about this great community and what do they want to see improve about our school district. And then how as a school board and the superintendent work together to make that happen for kids.
And that's the next question actually is, how do you as a superintendent work with the school board, between the school board superintendent, to build trust?
Between the school board, yeah, so I think it's a constant communication. If you don't have good communication, you're going to end up having issues. So for me, I'd want to establish some great relationships around how we meet on a regular basis, a weekly basis, to talk about issues. What's important for them? What are they hearing from their constituents, their elected officials? So in one-on-ones. And then in our board workshops, where we're talking about big issues that are important to the entire community here in Sarasota. We've got to have that open dialogue and hear where people's perspective, where they're coming from, with some ground rules about how we're going to treat one another.
All right, we're going to shift to early learning, okay? And the comment was made that early learning is a critical and important segue into the elementary world, which is typically where the school district starts. So can you please provide examples of how you have built collaboration with the community and organizations that serve that 0 to 5-year-old young child population?
Yeah, I'm very passionate about early childhood and those type of programs. For years, I've been working in Palm Beach with our local Children's Services Council, who has a priority around birth to age 3, through kindergarten readiness. And through that collaborative, we've got a lot of stakeholders that come to the table, including the school district, but a lot of outside providers. So in a number of ways, it's one, how do we improve student performance when we're talking about pre-K? What kind of standards do we have? And how do we provide that support? So through the Children's Services Council in Palm Beach, we've been able to leverage a grant where we actually hire district staff to go out and provide technical support, not just to the school district run programs, but to the community-based programs as well, to provide support. Because what we're looking for is better outcomes. In addition, how do we leverage funding amongst a blended funding model to increase the number of opportunities for families to have an early childhood experience outside of VPK and maybe some others? You know, VPK is half a day. How do we work to get that full day? For the school district in Palm Beach County, I made a decision a number of years to add another $1 million into that pot so we could expand the number of programs, the number of students that we're serving. But there's a lot of different opportunities from VPK, school readiness. I'm not sure of all the local funding, but how do we expand those opportunities? Because that's going to have a great return on investment when we lower and reduce that achievement gap later on, especially for our most needy children.
Okay, we're going to shift to diversity. So the question is, you know, what experiences do you have dealing with diverse districts? And I know you work in one currently, but tell us a little bit about that. And how will you build racial and ethnic equity in the schools for the students and the teachers?
Okay. So Palm Beach County, we're roughly a third Black, Hispanic, and white. So African American, Haitian American, a lot of Latinos from South America and other countries. So we're a very diverse population. We're about, our free and reduced lunch is about 62%. A lot of people don't realize that. We have rural, urban, and suburban type of communities, 38 different municipalities. So it's pretty diverse. And the first part of the question around dealing with diversity, I work for years with many different communities in Palm Beach County. So I have relationships with our Coalition for Black Student Achievement, really looking for the outcomes. That's our lowest performing subgroup. How do we work with some strategies that are going to really help that population of students improve? Our Hispanic Education Council, I work closely with them as well around issues that pertain to our Latino community. Really trying to address those deep issues. So one example with the Hispanic Coalition is around, you know, they really want to see more dual language programs. So Spanish and English 50-50 model. So our students come out biliterate. So we've expanded a lot of those type of programs. So again, it's about the relationships, collaboration, working together on a regular basis. And it's not just a one and done meeting. It's over time, talking about issues. We don't get there overnight. And the second part of the question.
How do you build the racial and ethnic equity in schools for students and teachers?
Yeah, very important conversation more than ever that we need to be really building everyone's cultural competence and our cultural competency in teaching students. So having conversations and being open and frank and talking about race. Are we comfortable with that and dealing with that? Understanding that's having a big impact on our country right now, and in fact, the world. So how do we get in front of that and start, you know, educating ourselves, you know, whether that's own personal bias, but just recognizing that so that we're better in front of the classroom and working with our students.
And now we're going to move to zoning. Okay.
Okay.
So to what degree have you worked with zoning schools in the past? And how do you determine attendance zones and zoning in an era of parental choice?
Yeah. Zoning can be a very complicated situation. People have a lot of passion about their school. So especially if you're in a particular situation, you know, recently we had a change in zonings about 2 years ago in Palm Beach County, a school that was overcrowded. We had a school that had space. So slowly phasing in that where we gave parents choice. So when we changed the boundaries to reduce the overcrowded school and increase at the other, We gave those parents who were still, till they phased out, opportunities to, some to stay if they were in certain choice programs. But then if they were going to, there was a couple schools nearby where you could choice into another elementary school program. So I think what's key to any type of zoning piece is hearing from your constituents, listening from, all perspectives of what people care about, what their desires are, what they want. And then at the same time, as a school district, how do we communicate our issues and our challenges of why we need to make certain challenges, so that we're, always, working towards transparency and helping people understand why certain decisions need to be made. And if we're able to make adjustments, which we have, we need to listen and be able to, pivot when we need to pivot based on what we hear from the community.
And how about a local education foundation? What's the relationship, what's the ideal relationship between an education foundation and the school district?
It's understanding priorities, right? So we have just an outstanding education foundation in Palm Beach County, have a great relationship with our executive director and all the board members. And part of that great relationship is about, one, that the Education Foundation understands our strategic plan and our strategic goals, what we're trying to accomplish for kids, and then how do they align their priorities to support that. They've always been 110% behind us. Just most recently, with what we're dealing with this pandemic and when we had to close schools, they were right behind us doing a device drive. They raised hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
Device drive?
A device
like
drive.
To buy computers,
to buy computers,
devices?
to buy
Wow.
devices.
Okay.
That we quickly had, they would drop them off, we would get them ready for our students and get them out into the homes of our families. So hundreds, I can't even tell you. They also worked at our feeding sites to provide for those families that had limited internet access, these kits of workbooks and crayons and things that a kid would love to do to keep them busy and active and learning, that they would drop off at our feeding sites. So I think the balance is constant communication with your education foundation, understanding the foundation, understanding our priorities, and hearing about their priorities based on their constituents, and work to solve the big problems that we have to reduce that, so for better outcomes for kids.
And could you describe in detail what would be your priorities within the first year of being appointed superintendent in Sarasota County Schools?
Yes, so obviously we're faced with the biggest challenge that I've ever seen, I think that most of us has ever seen in education across the world, across here, the United States, across here locally. How do we deal with not just the educational challenges our kids are going to come back with, but also the social emotional factors? So the top priority is, how do we safely work to get to where our kids can come back into the buildings where we know that is the best place for them to be, to thrive. So how do we work towards that? And then, we've talked about that COVID-19 slide, right? We talked about the summer slide where kids learning go backwards. So how do we work to address and put in strategies to address those particular challenges that our kids are going to be faced with when they come back? And at the same time, the social emotional factors. We're all experiencing trauma going through this new normal way of life. So what mental behavioral health supports, what just opportunities for kids to just talk about their experiences, what they went through, so they can get to a safe place to start learning again. In addition, our employees have gone through a lot. They're worried about coming back to work. So how do we also provide that support through this next year for our employees as well?
And what is the single most important thing that you would want this community to know about you?
So I love positive and supportive climates and culture in a community. So I like people, I like being around people, I like to have a good time, and I like to have, really good outcomes for kids, and have a good time while we're getting there. So we're all gonna have our agreements and disagreements, but let's do this in a way that we can work together as a community to solve the challenges that we face and then celebrate these successes like we've never have celebrated before. This is a great school district that has done great things for kids. Let's just keep building on that success.
Okay, so here's the question that's unique to you, okay?
Okay.
And it asks about some communication questions that came up, and specifically it talks about some, why would some community members in Boca Raton feel like there was a lack of communication, and the opportunity for you to kind of clear this up? Do you know what they're referring to?
Probably an issue that we had at one of our high schools.
Okay, so could you maybe address that, because I think people recognize that that you worked in Palm Beach and that issue came up. So why would some parents have felt that there was a lack of communication with the parents, the teachers, and the community? Is the question.
Yeah, it's a long, complicated issue. I think this particular issue was being addressed, was being worked on. However, also there's some ongoing litigation, so I have to be somewhat cautious.
Understood.
So working through a very complicated situation, I think, could we have done a better job of communication? Sure, we can always do that. So that's important feedback to take.
So let's pivot to that. Since it is an ongoing litigation, what have you learned from that experience that this is referencing? You said, could we do things differently? What would you do differently?
Yeah, so I think having regular check-ins with direct reports on more about issues and how things are going, I think are going to be really important. So how I work with, if I'm chosen for superintendent, how I work with those. How do I get into that cadence of making sure if there's hot issues that I'm kept abreast of that early on during those times.
Great. Well, we really want to thank you both for being here with me tonight and for the long day today, but you're in for a longer day tomorrow because you have 5 hours of interviews, an hour with each of the 5 board members. So I'm going to let you go for now. You stay right here, though. We're going to cut right now. We're going to change mics, bring in the next candidate. Please stay with us.
Table challenge, Katie. Let's see, Katie. Okay, can you get him?
One doesn't stop eating, the other one won't eat. Sebastian's a picky eater. Yeah, so they're both interesting kids. Like Bella goes to me. She goes, I don't even know why you're so worried about what you did or what didn't do. I couldn't do it. Perfect. Okay, great.
Thank you.
So.
All right, so we'll wait. 5 and 3 changes. And I'll introduce you. And thanks again for joining us. With me now is Dr. Gonzalo LaCava, and I'm certain I don't have the accent right, but welcome, Dr. LaCava, also from Palm Beach County. So you're our third candidate here tonight from Palm Beach County. Let me explain to you where these questions came from.
All right.
This is the alternate to a community meet and greet. So throughout the day, while all of you were interviewing, there was a portal up and community members could input questions for people. So we culled it all together. There was more than 75 questions submitted.
Okay.
And we put them in some groups, and so I have some general groupings. All of the questions, except for the last one, are the same questions that everyone's getting.
All right.
So you'll have one unique one at the end. Are we ready?
Ready, let's do it.
Okay, the first question has to do with the community.
Okay.
So what is the most attractive thing that is making you consider a move to Sarasota County?
Sure, great question. You know, my wife and I have had the opportunity to, drive around, go to different places. I think yesterday we got here and we went to the beach. We drove around Arm Circle, but this hasn't been our first time that we've been in Sarasota. We just found, first of all, it's so beautiful. Then today, I was able to get on a bus for about 3.5 hours, and I had a great tour guide, so many pieces, so much historical pieces about Sarasota, the schools, when they were built, and so many great places to raise a family. And also, I've been talking to people, since I considered this job. And I don't think there's a single person, whether it's from Tallahassee to the local level, that has said anything negative. Everybody's like, great place to live, great schools, you're going to love it for your family. So I think when I was thinking about all those things put together, this is a great place for me to raise, my children and be with my wife and live and play. One thing that's very important to me, it's about family. And, Sebastian and Isabella are my kids. They're 13 and 11, and the transition that I make into this district is very important because we are going to have to set some roots. Also, we're going to live here. They're going to go to school here. They're going to graduate from here. So all those components were considered. But overall, every single facet that was discussed by people made it 100% sure that I want to live here, that I want to be the superintendent here, that I want to lead here, that I want to be part of the community, not just as a school member, but also as a community member. And also, we have so many other things that we want to do, and we always involve ourselves deeply into whatever community we're part of. But Sarasota is a great place to live, great schools, and great environment, and great people.
So you've hit on the next part of the question, which is where would we see you out in the community?
Sure.
Where will we find you? Where will your presence be felt?
Yeah. So in every place that my wife and my family have been living, whether it's Orlando, Atlanta, West Palm Beach, we love to get out. Number one, I'm a foodie. So I love to get out to see new restaurants. So hopefully there are a lot of great restaurants in Sarasota. People tell me that. The second thing is my son and my daughter are avid soccer players, so we're going to be representing some travel soccer team here. And we tend to come to Sarasota a lot because they have great soccer fields. And so I think on the soccer field, you're going to see me in restaurants. And plus, not only that, we need to get involved with the community. One thing that I was telling the board this afternoon is that we need to stop isolating ourselves as as public schools, and we need to reach across the line and really be involved, whether it's Rotary, Kiwanis, whether it's EAD Foundation or the Performing Arts Consortium, whatever it might be. You're going to see me and my wife be part of this community. We want to be part of this community. My family's going to be part of this community. And if you're going to live somewhere, make sure that you're 110% committed to being part of a great community like Sarasota.
Well, let's talk about trust in relationships. Okay, there were multiple questions about that issue, and some of the language, some of the words that we saw were things like the need to restore trust, that there are some fractured and damaged relationships, that there needs to be an increased faith in the district, and there's been some questions about morale. I mean, they've had some tough times. So how do you intend to restore much needed trust and faith in the district?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've studied and I've learned about the Sarasota community, it's a very trusting community. It's very evident that, There's great public schools, and referendums continue to be voted and approved by large majorities. So we know that the community loves their public schools, loves their performing arts. We know that's number one. We also know that the community wants a better relationship with the superintendent and the board. We know that through surveys, through information that has been provided, throughout this process. So I think the first thing that needs to happen is a trusting relationship develop with the board and the superintendent. And the only way that's going to happen is by having very, very truthful conversations. That's number one. And I think the other piece about trust and relationships is that I need to be transparent with absolutely everybody, from the schoolhouse teacher to the community member in Sarasota. I need to make sure that I am letting them know what's going on, making sure that I'm transparent about budgeting and operations. There should be nothing hidden under the sun. In my experiences and moving from one state to another in my districts, one of the things that I've been able to do is work with teams, work with them very well. I'm not the type of person that goes in there and explodes things and gets rid of people. No, I know that I have to work with the members of a team that I inherit. And many times people may say, who's this guy coming out from another state or another district? But after we set expectations, we have great conversations together, they know that I want to do great things for kids and great things for teachers and also great things for the community. We start to kind of build a bond. And it's very important because you can't do the work unless you have trusting relationships. So that means that there's a lot of building that I need to do as a brand new person to Sarasota, a brand new person to the school system. I'm going to spend a lot of time in my first 90, 100 days really being out there, whether it's students, teachers, parents, community, clergy, businessmen, nonprofit. I need to get out. I need to make sure that I'm listening, that I'm learning, that I'm leading. So there's a lot of things that I need to do to build the community's trust. But the first thing is to set really good expectations and really a system of communication and collaboration.
So you mentioned one thing that I want to go a little bit deeper into, and that is the relationship between the board and the superintendent, and specifically, how do you build trust there?
Sure, I think within my first 100 days, that's probably my first goal. That's the first goal of any smart superintendent. If you can't build a really good relationship with a board, pretty much your tenure may be over real quick. I think it's the rise and fall of a superintendent is really building the relationship between the superintendent and the board. During the first 90 days, I'm committed to doing that. I think I need to have some really great conversations one-on-one, making sure that I understand their hopes, their challenges, their fears, where they want to be after a year, 5 years, where they want me to be after a year. Having conversations about my expectations. I want to make sure that they let me know what it is that they want me to do. And I also want to share my expectations on how to speak to, my senior team, how we're going to represent each other out in the community. I truly believe also that it's better to air, your discomforts or things that you don't agree behind closed doors and see if you can figure it out. But I'm also not afraid of healthy debate, at the boardroom. And let us go back. If there's something that the board maybe doesn't agree with, or I don't agree, give me the opportunity to go back with my team and work it out and bring a better product. But I think that's how a healthy relationship works. It is important. And that's something that I'm going to spend a lot of time doing. That's a lot of investment, whether we have to get together in a retreat or whether we continue to have one-on-one meetings. But that is goal number one.
And let's shift to early learning.
Okay.
So early learning is critical and an important segue into the elementary grades, as you know. Yeah. So can you give us examples of how you've built collaboration with the community and organizations that are the providers, in many cases, for those 0 to 5-year-old young people?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. Early childhood literacy is number one. It's very important. In 2011, 2012, Brookings came out with a research study, a newspaper article that said by the time we start the kindergarten, kids that are read to have 30 million more words in their repertoire than kids that are not being read to, and that usually is our brown and black kids and the kids that are in poverty. They just don't have the resources at home, or they have the education. So that is very important. So when I was a area superintendent in Fulton County in Atlanta, Georgia, one of the very first things that we found out is there's not enough pre-K and kindergarten services out there, preschool, pre-K, and also quality kindergarten. That's what I meant. So we started to build more pre-K programs, work with the parents, work with community affiliations, making sure that they could support us, whether with human capital or with resources or with monies. One of the things that we started to notice is that the more we poured into early childhood programs, and we started to see more of these programs out in the community, we started to see a better quality student coming into our schools. So I think that if we don't figure the reading and literacy issues early, it's too late once they get to 5th grade. It's too late once we get to 8th grade. I think pouring money into that grade is not, it's not the best investment. So we really need to make sure that we are doing everything possible between the grades, early grades and 3rd grade. Sarasota is a high-performing school district. We know that. I can tell you that I've looked at the data, and we have a lot of kids reading at grade level. They're graduating. We have a lot of kids performing well, but at the end of the day, we still have 20% of kids or more that are not reading by the time they get to 3rd grade. 3rd grade reading, and that's huge because that determines whether kids are going to go graduate from high school or college. So early literacy is a huge foundation that we must continue to pour money into, resources, and work with the community on.
All right, let's move to diversity.
Okay.
So the question is, what experience do you have dealing with diverse districts, and how will you build racial and ethnic equity in schools for students and teachers?
Sure. Being a leader of color, being a person that has, was born in the United States, but my parents were from another country. I was an ESOL student as well. And I fully understand how difficult it is for some of our parents to understand, the system, how to get support, how to get, the resources that they need to be successful. So I think the number one thing that everybody needs to realize, it's not a teacher problem, it's not a student problem. I think it's a system problem. And what I mean by that is it is an imperative that we help teachers and students understand how to work with diverse populations. I've worked in, whether in Orlando, I was a one-way bilingual a principal. I've worked with students that came in from Puerto Rico and Venezuela, and they didn't know any English. And by the time they were in 3rd grade, they were fully bilingual. And not only that, at the time there was FCAT, and we had a large portion of our population scoring 3 or above. Then when I went to Fulton County Schools, we were working with ELL, whether on training, providing strategies for our teachers, helping them to understand that things are changing in Atlanta as well. And so we really did a phenomenal job helping our teachers understand that. And not only that, we had an issue with providing high-level opportunities to children of color. We worked through that as well. And then now as the Chief of Human Resources, one of the things that we're spending a lot of time is in the leadership development is looking at how we provide strategies around equity for our principals and our teachers. Unless they're given the support, unless they're given the awareness, it's very difficult. I think a lot of people talk about equity. I think a lot of people read a lot about equity. They can kind of spout a lot of information, but are we actually pouring resources into those schools that need a lot more help, that are behind? Are we training parents? Are we supporting teachers? And then if we start to do all those type of things, we'll see closing the achievement gap. We'll see more learning gains. We'll see more kids of color graduate. And that's what we need to do, especially in Sarasota, where there's still a large portion of kids that are brown and black not graduating on time in 4 years. So we need to do a lot of that. But my experience are vast in that, and I'm very proud of them because it's relatable to me.
Yeah. Have you worked on zoning issues in the past, and how do you determine attendance zones and zoning at a time when we want to offer choice?
Yeah, complicated issue. It's one of those challenges that you'll have 50% of the parents agree, and then 50% of the parents disagree because they don't want to leave a school that they've grew up in. In every single district that I've worked in, there's been zoning pieces that I've worked on. Indirectly. As being an executive cabinet member, I'm always in the decision-making process. So we dealt with one in Palm Beach, and we've dealt with one in Fulton County. And the one in Fulton County was really uncomfortable because parents kids had grown up in a certain school in the Fulton County area since kindergarten. Now we're changing the zone, and we had a large gathering of parents. And I truly believe that large gathering of parents could have been resolved if we would have communicated more, communicated early, give them timelines, help them understand, help them really to, guide their answers. I think when you're rezoning, you really need to be attentive to the nervousness of parents, because now they're going to go to a brand new school. And so I think, one of the things that we've done, or I've done always, is I believe that we need to have a system and a process. What's the problem? Why are we trying to solve it? What's the data? Make sure that you provide that to parents. Hey, listen, the reason we're rezoning is because of this. And we're going to do this, and we're going to make sure that we take care of you. And then when it's all said and done, when we're able to resolve this problem, it's never going to be a sure fix. It's never going to be agreed by everybody. But I think people with information can make better decisions and feel a little bit better about that. But rezoning is a very tough issue, very tough, and I hope I never have to deal with it.
What is the ideal relationship between a school district and an education foundation, a local education foundation?
So I can share our relationship that we have in Palm Beach. The Education Foundation works very closely with Palm Beach County Schools. They're, one of the things that the foundation does for us is they're a collection agency of supplies for teachers and supplies for students. In the summer they provide book bags with a lot of supplies. They also allow teachers to come into the agency to really look for things that they need in the classroom that maybe they don't get from the budget that they're receiving from the school. The Education Foundation is always looking for ways to align themselves to our strategic planning process as well. They're also a big voice in our cabinet, and I know that we work closely with them. Our superintendent works closely with them. They're very supportive of our teachers, and in regards to Teacher of the Year, Paraprofessional of the Year, and that's in Palm Beach. When we were in Atlanta, Georgia, the foundation there, they may not be called Edge Foundation, but they were very similarly close. Functioned the same, and we did the same thing. We provided resources, to students, and we really wanted to make sure we celebrated the great things that teachers are doing throughout the district. So great relationship.
I'm gonna give you 30 seconds.
Yeah.
All right, here's this question specifically for you. You mentioned being the chief HR officer in a very, very large school district. So do you have enough experiences in instruction and finance and facilities and all the other areas of responsibility for superintendents?
No, I believe I do. I think I'm ready. I'm ready to hit the ground running. I believe that I've been in education for 23 years, and my resume and my experiences prove to that fact. So I think that I will do a fine job here, moving academics, making sure that growth is supported, making sure that human capital, recruitment and retention, so I can bring everything together with my experiences to be a great superintendent in Sarasota County Schools.
Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry our time has elapsed,
No,
but
thank you.
We're going to ask the viewers at home to stick with us. We have another interview, and we'll be back in just a few moments.
Great.
You see a cable? You need me to stand or no? Scoot my butt. I'll sit on it. Better? Izquierdo.
I just want to make sure izquierdo.
Izquierdo. It's fine. It's okay.
I will never be able to roll an R. Somebody's going to have to stand up. Thank you for joining us again, and we're with our fifth and final finalist for the superintendent position in Sarasota County, Marie Izquierdo from Miami-Dade County. So welcome, glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Andrea.
Yes, the first thing we want to know, and let me tell you where these questions came from.
Sure.
While you all were in your interviews today, we had an open portal and community members could type in and submit questions. So we had over 75 questions submitted.
Awesome.
And what we've done is we kind of culled them together thematically and try to get as many of them in as we could.
Great.
So the first question has to do with the community. And the question is, what's the most attractive thing that is making you consider a move to Sarasota County?
I think, thank you for the question, and thank you for doing this. I think having a community forum is very important, and given the global pandemic and the fact that we have to be socially distant from one another, it's really a tribute to Sarasota County that they wanted to do this, at least in this alternate setting, so that we can give our community a kind of a peek into
Sure.
the 5 candidates. I think it's great. So Sarasota County is very attractive to me for a number of reasons. I'll just maybe tell you a few. As a child, I used to come here quite a bit, and I remember fondly Siesta Key, Longboat Key, and spending a lot of time in Sarasota. My family just liked it here as a little girl. I hadn't been back in a while. Came back, my daughter does travel soccer, so I came back for a soccer game recently, and I just fell in love again with the location, and I love everything Florida. I've been in Florida my entire career, nearly 30 years, and I think that the most important thing, two more, is I feel a sense of welcome and a sense of community here. It's a city, but it's still a community. I think that's really important, and I think that that's where I want to live the next chapter of my life. And frankly, I just think it's a really good fit where the community, or the school system rather, is right now, and my experience and what I can bring to the table.
Well, the other question is, like, how do you plan to become a part of the community? Where will people see your presence?
That's a great question. Well, I hope to be very engaged in the community. I hope to be very visible in the community. I do my groceries, I work out in gyms. I will hopefully be able to attend some church services here as well. And then the business community is really important to me as well, and the arts. So I'm looking forward to, I think, I walked by, of course right now it's closed, but the Opera House. I'm looking forward to seeing some performances that are just really prevalent in this community and really enriching to my own personal aesthetic and to my family.
Wonderful. Next category is trust and relationships. And there were a lot of questions on this topic, and they used words and phrases like the need to restore trust, that there's a fractured and, some damaged relationships, that there needs to be increased faith in the school district. There's some questions about morale. So how do you intend to restore and repair, if necessary, build trust with the community?
So for me, I as an outsider looking in, I would love to tell your community that we don't see that from the outside looking in. So I think that's something that should be celebrated. Maybe there are, I know that there is some history and some sense of anxiety over that, and surely it's internal in the community itself, but from an outsider looking in, you look very hospitable, very warm, very welcoming, and that's exciting for me. Having said that, I think that the way that I would try to rebuild trust and raise the level of integrity of our school district is really to be a role model and to lead by example, right? Be very communicative, be very accessible, be very responsive. And I think when the community sees that you have a superintendent and a board that is communicative, responsive to the needs of the stakeholders and the parents, but not just the parents, the whole community at large and the businesses, I think that you start raising your cachet, if you will, with the community. And I look forward to doing that by leading by example. I think also communicating the great stuff that's happening in Sarasota County schools is really important. Oftentimes we try to focus, human nature is to focus on the opportunities for improvement, weaknesses, things that, make the paper sometimes, right? But what we need to be telling our own narrative. So Sarasota County schools needs to be front and center saying what's happening, the great things that are happening in Sarasota County in our school district, and making sure that that's our brand, that our brand isn't distrust or low morale, but that our brand is that we're all about student achievement, that we love the arts, that our kids come to school and they're so happy, that we have the best teachers in the state of Florida. That's our brand. And I think the role of a superintendent is to kind of focus the leaders, in this case the board and other leaders, because the board are not singularly the leaders. We have a lot of leaders that are influencing our agenda, but really bringing focus to those individuals. And I think the first step is by having focus groups, being out and visible. I intend to visit every school in the first 3 weeks, if not 2 weeks, upon becoming superintendent in Sarasota County, building relationships of trust and creating with stakeholder input, employee and non-employee alike, a really strong strategic plan, because that strategic plan will be our blueprint for the next 5 years. And if we all can agree that our singular mission is student achievement, and we write a blueprint and we commit to a blueprint where we're all have our oars in the water and we're all rowing in the same direction, then I think that organically the district's integrity and just response to the community will be very high.
Okay, I have to ask. You made a reference to growing.
Yeah.
Was that intentional?
Well, okay, that's a great question. So I must admit that I love to paddleboard. I find it very relaxing. It's one of the few things besides running that I do where I'm not thinking. I'm just kind of just blank slate and just kind of in a meditative state, if you will. And I happen to notice that there's some couple of nice places to launch a paddleboard in Sarasota County.
Well, and Sarasota County is known worldwide for rowing teams and bringing in rowing competitions. So I had to point that out.
Not quite rowing, but I will stand up paddle.
You may surprise yourself. So let me ask you another question then. How do you build trust between the superintendent and the board?
Sure. I think, first of all, I hope that I've already started that process, and part of it is by being very professional and being very focused and understanding your role, right? So I understand very clearly that the role of a superintendent is to be the face of the district, to be the lead communicator, if you will, the brand of the district, both in good times and adversity, right? And not to shy away from that as well. But I think that in terms of the board, my singular job is really to execute the priorities of the school board. That is what a superintendent is hired to do by the board. That is their job. And so I think that if we, again, going back to the strategic plan, if we keep bringing the board and others back to the strategic plan that we consensually agree, this is our North Star. This is what we want to do. We want to be the best district in the state of Florida. We don't want to be third. We want to be one. We want to be first. And you know what? We're going to do that in every student subgroup. So we're not going to just do that in the aggregate, but we're going to be an A-rated district for our Black students, for our English language learners, for our students with disabilities, for all children. And I think that if I as a superintendent can keep board members and others focused on that, I think that you'll have a wonderful professional relationship between the board and the superintendent.
Let's move to early learning. Okay, so early learning is critical and it's an important segue into the elementary world, which is typically where the school district kind of begins their work. So can you give us examples of how you have built collaboration with the community and organizational partners, those people who provide whatever services to young people between birth and 5 years old?
Absolutely. So early learning and early childhood is under my umbrella right now as the Chief Academic Officer in Miami-Dade. And we've been very intentional in our own strategic plan of making sure that early childhood and a focus on early childhood is preeminent of one of our priorities. We understand fully that if students are not coming to the schoolhouse prepared, then those students are going to have a harder chance of catching up, and the gaps are going to widen, and they're not going to read by third grade, and they're not going to graduate with their cohorts. So for us, early childhood has been very important. And what I've done is I've established a great team in that office. We work with different organizations like you mentioned. So we work with the Children's Trust. The founder of the Children's Trust actually is one of my references. I'd love for the community to know that. His name is David Lawrence. He's fantastic. And so the Children's Trust is a great partner for us. We also have early Head Start and Head Start. So in Miami-Dade, we have classrooms for birth to 2 years. So we have babies in our classrooms as well, which is a highlight of school visits for me. I enjoy visiting those classrooms, and it's really God's work what they're doing with those children. And Head Start and Early Head Start, as you know, is a federal program. It's subsidized by the federal government, and it's critical for us in terms of in our urban core, our most fragile communities, to have that foundation very, very early on. So we've grown the number of Early Head Start and Head Start classes that we have in Miami-Dade intentionally. Another thing that we've done is we've worked with our municipalities. So we have a program that we launched, I want to say 2 years ago, which I oversaw the launch of it, and it was through philanthropy as well as donations from the city of Miami, where they committed to funding for every kindergartner a college savings account.
Oh, really?
Yes. So every child in kindergarten in Miami-Dade, their parent gets the child actually gets a technical trust fund, gets $100 seed money for their college savings account. And the data, I didn't really understand it until I actually read the research. Students that have as little as $300 in a college savings account, in a savings account, generally speaking, actually graduate at a higher rate than students that did not. And it's simply because of the kind of the psychology behind someone is invested in me. It's not really a significant amount of money, but the research is very compelling around that. So we have that program as well. And also through the Children's Trust, we're doing, right as we speak, book deliveries to kids, making sure that homes are print rich, and also working with the families of children before they come to the schoolhouse door. So we're training parents through the Parent Academy. I believe in Sarasota it's called the Parent University. We're doing a lot of work in early childhood, so we're connecting our Parent University with our early childhood office. Additionally, I can talk about this for a long time, we also have a partnership with public supermarkets, and we have worked with them to develop signage, particularly in the produce section, that is our brand. So you'll see the school district logo, and it's really great recruitment, like send your kids to our schools when they get to age 5. But in the meantime, it has kind of call outs, if you will, where it's telling a parent, you might want to ask your child, what color are these apples? Or you might want to ask your child, you know, what is this? So just really kind of open-ended questions for parents to help parents help educate their babies really when they're in the grocery store.
Wonderful. And we know you're from Miami-Dade, so when we ask questions about do you have experience in a diverse district, I'm going to set that one to the side. But how will you here be able to build racial and ethnic equity in the schools for both students and teachers?
Sure. Some of your school-based administrators were asking those very questions, and I welcome them. So for us, our focus in terms of, it's really a three-prong for us. It's diversity, equity, and inclusion. I feel like those are all kind of the prongs of equity in general. So we want to make sure, and we have policies in place in Miami-Dade, many of which were launched by me or proposed by me, related to making sure that our teacher corps is reflective of our student demographic, that kids see themselves in their teachers, that they see themselves in their school leaders and their principals as well. We need to look at our hiring practices as well. I know that you're doing great work around culturally and linguistically responsive schools. I think that's going to be a big portion of the professional development when the teachers return very soon, in about 39 days or so. And so that work, I think, is really important. So I feel like you're in the right direction in terms of equity, and then inclusion, right? Making sure that all children feel that they belong, and that all staff members feel that they belong, and that students are included in general ed, if they're special ed, to the least restrictive environment, so they get the same benefits that all the children do.
And then you mentioned earlier in your interview there's been some questions about the choice in Miami. So this question really has to do with zoning, and how do you determine attendance zones and zoning, and how do you do all that in an era of choice?
Sure, so that's a great question. I work hand in hand with the Deputy Superintendent of Schools, or the Chief Operating Officer, the Jody Dumas of Miami-Dade. And so I work on the program end, she works on the zoning end, and we work collaboratively. And we have a process, an attendance boundary process that goes before the board to zone schools. In terms of choice, we offer choice district-wide. So we have about 70% of our students right now that are exercising choice. When you peel that back, that doesn't always mean that they're going to their non-boundary school. Sometimes it is. So some of them are going to magnet schools, and some of them have transportation, and some of them don't have transportation. That's always something that you want to consider when you're looking at diversity and equity and inclusion. If you're keeping access from a particular subgroup because they don't have a means of getting to that choice programming, that's something I would want to look at. And we do that. So we look at the poorest zip codes in Miami, and if that child gets into a magnet that's not his boundary school, we will offer transportation, because those zip codes, we want to make sure that they have the highest quality programming available or access to it as possible. Many of them don't, and then others are career academies. Maybe they're the child's zone school, but we're opening academies so the child has a choice, the student has a choice in their program of study. So they're specializing in a particular strand. Maybe it's hospitality and tourism. In Venice, I think I saw, in Venice High, I saw their culinary program. So depending on the child's interest, making sure that it's relevant and engaging to them. There's a demand for that choice. That's really important to us. But also there's the economy, the local economy is being considered. And so for us, we have an entity called the Beacon Council, and they're kind of like the economic overseers, the local economy drivers, and they did a study a couple years back called One Community, One Goal. And what that study highlighted was that there were 7 distinct burgeoning industries in Miami. So you knew that if you get a high school diploma or even an AA or maybe even a college diploma, and you have a specialization in one of those industries, you're gonna get a high-paying job. You're gonna land a high-paying job. So we aligned our programming for CTE, for career and technical education, which this is a perfect example of that, where we're at right now. We aligned it to those 7 industries, whether it's aerospace or hospitality and tourism or IT or health sciences, to make sure that students not only got through school in a relevant and engaging program of study for them, but that when they got out of school, they were pretty much guaranteed a nice wage and a great job.
Wow. This is the last question. You have about 45 seconds.
Okay.
So all of your background has been in a school district that's much, much larger and slightly demographically different than Sarasota. So how do you think your experience there will translate effectively here?
I think that, well, disclaimer, I also worked for the Florida Department of Education. And when I worked for the Florida Department of Education, I worked in their school improvement body of work. And I actually worked in Monroe County. So I helped Monroe County, which is a small, very small, the southernmost district in the state of Florida, in terms of helping their schools that were in need of turnaround, their DNF schools. And so I kind of have experience in both. But I think that to answer your question directly, yes, Miami-Dade is very, very large, but then there are communities in Miami-Dade that are pretty much complementary in terms of size in Sarasota, and oftentimes also demographics. So I think that you could extrapolate that experience, or actually the opposite of extrapolate, into Sarasota.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And I really want to thank those of you who have watched all of these interviews. I hope they've been as interesting to you as they have been to me. And when you have any questions or comments or any information that you'd like to share, please reach out to your school board members through email or phone call. And, you know, the school board is going to be making their decision July the 14th. And we just really want to thank you once again for your interest in the next superintendent in Sarasota County. Have a wonderful evening.